Hello. I'd like to welcome you to this broadcast of things you weren't taught in church. And we're going to be looking at flying saucers today, angels and aliens, and that brings me around. I need to plug my new book. It's entitled Angels or Aliens, and it's available everywhere books are sold. You can get it at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. We have a special going right now on our website, Christ Church of the Holy Word, where you can get a signed copy, regular price, same as you pay online. So I'd encourage you, especially if you like this lecture, to get that book, because there is a lot in that book about what we're going to be talking about today. Flying saucers, life on other planets, extraterrestrials. It's a big part of the book, and it's explained, they are explained through Scripture. Because the Bible, as Jesus once told us, God has told us all things. We just have to figure it out and dig it out of the letter that he has written us, the Bible. I'm going to share a picture with you here. We're going to put this up on the screen. And I'm not going to tell you the story about how I came by this picture. There's actually 5 of them. We're going to do a little segment here in a week or two that will go into the actual pictures, how I came in possession of them. Some of you may have seen this on the internet or different publications. I can only tell you this, and I'll go into depth in our little documentary about them. But I got the negatives to these pictures in, it was either 1971 or 1972, and I went through some rigors that I'll explain in the little documentary about them, of how I came to the conclusion that they're real. You have to remember, I received them, they were taken earlier than that even, but I received them in the early 70s, way before the computer was even around. So Photoshop and all that stuff, it's not something that is involved with these pictures. But I want to use, and we'll probably bring this picture up during this lecture, I want you to look at it in comparison to what Ezekiel is explaining. So the whole purpose of this particular lecture is to explain UFOs, extraterrestrials, whatever you might call them, from a biblical point of view. Now, the greatest mentor in my life always used to say, unidentified flying objects, they aren't unidentified to God. He knows exactly what they are, where they came from, and who's piloting them. And hopefully at the end of this lecture you'll get an idea of what my belief about it is. Also, I'd like to encourage you right now, when you're studying with us, it's a great idea to have a little piece of paper and a pencil, because I'm going to give you some references, and if you want to, and I encourage you to, you can, after the lecture, go and check it out, get a Strong's Concordance, check out the information that I give you, so you know that I'm not just blowing hot air at you. One of the things is the date that this is happening. Ezekiel chapter 1 is around 484 BC. Now, some Bible historians will talk about earlier, like 590, 500 and whatever. But Bullinger, who is one of the greatest Bible scholars of the 19th century, identifies a 112-year mistake in the dating that goes on with most of the Bible historians. He has an appendix in the Companion Bible. Bullinger edited the Companion Bible. We highly recommend the Companion Bible. It's available in our bookstore. But he has an appendix in the back that goes in and explains where this 112-year mistake was made. Quite simply, you'll see an example of it in this first chapter of Ezekiel, because there were a lot of names that were very similar, and of the kings of Israel, and they got some of them mixed up. So, and Bullinger documents that in that appendix in the Companion Bible. Ezekiel in the Hebrew, El, or God, strengthens. That's what it means. Ezekiel was a priest, which means he was a Levite, and is considered in Bible history one of the four great Old Testament prophets. You have Daniel, and you have Ezekiel, and you have Isaiah, and you have Jeremiah. And they are considered the four greatest prophets of the Old Testament. Ezekiel, at the time of this writing, was carried away to Babylon. Israel was taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar, and they were taken captive into Babylon. And this was about 11 years. The captivity, the enslavement of Israel took place about 11 years before the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple there. Now, it's important, and this is one of the things you might want to jot down. The word Babylon comes from the word Babel, and most of you might have an idea of what the meaning of Babel means. Somebody that babbles on. Well, Babel and Babylon mean confusion. So, in the book of Revelation, where you read about the harlot being carried into Babylon, that is the confusion of the end times. And if you look around today, friends, if you can't see the confusion going on, you have blinders on. It's everywhere. So let's begin this first chapter of Ezekiel, chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Shebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. So, remember, Ezekiel is captive now. He's along with the rest of Israel, and he's been taken captive into Babylon, into confusion. Verse 2, in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's, with an N, captivity. It's important to know this is one of the places where the years got off. Jehoiakim was the son of the previous king of Israel, Jehoiakim, with an M, easily confused. And Jehoiakim was only 18 years old when Israel was taken into captivity, and he was actually only king for 3 months. So this is one of the places where the timeline gets off. Let's continue verse 4. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Now I want you to picture a whirlwind swirling, whipping around and around. We're going to have Ezekiel compare this to wheels. And you know how wheels spin. The only thing is, with Ezekiel's description, these wheels are on the side. and they have fiery brightness coming out of them and surrounding them. Now, in the Hebrew language, there's no word that means color. There's no real word for color. This word that's translated color here is ayan in the Hebrew, and in your Strong's Concordance, write this down, it's 5869. And what it means is the eye, or the ability to see, or translated into this, or transliterated into this, it looks like. And this word amber is word 2830, shazmal. And the meaning in the Strong, this is a very ancient word. The meaning, Strong says it's probably bronze or highly polished metal. Now, one thing you should know about this word, Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, this is the only place in the Old Testament where that word is found. It's there more than a few times, but only in this book. So I want you to remember, Ezekiel is telling us this story about this vision of the whirlwind and these wheels. And the only mode of transportation that Ezekiel has ever seen up until this point in time was probably an ox cart. You know, an old wooden cart with big wooden wheels drawn by an ox. And here we have an object that Ezekiel relates to looking like one of those wheels off of a cart turned on its side. The only thing is that this wheel is a bronze disc. Let's continue, verse 5. Also, out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. These 4 living creatures are the cherubim. They're this. If you want a reference to them, they're the same creatures that are spoken of in the 4th chapter of Revelation, verses 6 through 9. They are described as 4 beasts full of color. 4 beasts full of eyes. And it's important to remember that in Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 15, Satan is described as a cherub. Cherub is singular of cherubim. They are a rank of supernatural beings that are above the angels. In Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 15, you will also find it documented there that Satan himself was the serpent in the garden. And now that's a subject for another day, but tuck that away, and we'll come back to that one of these days. Let's continue. Verse 6, chapter 1 of Ezekiel. And every one of these wheels had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. 4 faces and 4 wings. We'll find out more about that in verse 10, but know this, keep this in mind. These are vehicles that Ezekiel is seeing, and the only thing that Ezekiel has ever seen that flies, it has wings. So it's very natural for him to describe these vehicles as having wings. Let's continue in verse 7. And their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of varnished brass. Again, that word color would be looked like. Straight feet. Now we're going to show you another picture here. It's a drawing, and it's very, very common in drawings of UFOs. And you'll notice that the straight legs come out with the little rounds. What Ezekiel is talking about here is a landing gear. Straight legs, a round pad on the bottom, and I think he does a pretty good job of describing something that he is just totally out of his realm of experience. Verse 8, and they had the hands of a man under their wings on their four sides, and they four had their faces and their wings. Now, this word hands, it's number 3027 in your Strong's Concordance. It's Yawd, Y-A-W-D, and it means open hands showing power as to lift. Ezekiel's looking at this vehicle that moves. Now, his first reaction is that it must have wings, but he doesn't see the wings flapping. So what he's trying to convey to us is there's a power there that's lifting it up and down as if hands were underneath it. Now, again, remember these faces and wings. We're going to talk more about them in just a minute here. Verse 9 to continue. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. So picture Ezekiel's vision of movement here based on what he knew. Again, back to that ox cart. You know, you had a horse and where an ox, and where the ox's head went, that's where the cart went. Well, this didn't have a front or a back. It didn't have an animal pulling it. It didn't have a head or a tail. It just moved in whatever direction that it wanted. And I think Ezekiel's doing a pretty good job here describing. Let's continue verse 10. As for the likeness of their faces, they four had the face of a man. That's one. Remember, there's four. A man. And the face of a lion. That's two. The lion's on the right side. And they four had the face of an ox on the left side. That's three. And they four also had the face of an eagle. So on four sides of this wheel, there were pictures. Ezekiel is talking about the faces that he sees, and they're emblems, basically, like you would see on an airplane. You know, on a United States airplane, you'll see the star with the blue stripes. These emblems are referred to the certain tribes of Israel. When Israel would encamp, the 12 tribes would be surrounded, while 8 of the tribes would be surrounded by 4 of the 12 tribes, and their job was security protection. Now, if you want to verify this, again, write it down, go to Numbers chapter 2, verse 10. And it gives you the whole scenario of when Israel camped. And what would happen on the north side, Dan would camp. And their emblem and their flag was of an eagle. And then on the east side was Judah. And their emblem and their flag that they would fly was a lion. And on the south side was the tribe of Reuben. And Reuben's symbol was a man, and they had a man on the flags that they would fly for their tribes. And lo and behold, on the west side was Ephraim, and guess what their emblem was? It was an ox, and on their flags were the symbol of an ox. So, in other words, what Ezekiel is seeing on these aircraft was the official symbols of the 4 protective tribes of Israel. Let's continue. Verse 11. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. Now, if you picture a bird, I've got a bird, a cockatiel, and when he folds his wings in, you see the round hump. They don't look like wings unless they spread their wings out. What Ezekiel is describing here is wings pulled into the body. So he's seeing around. They must have wings in his head. They fly, so they must have wings. And he sees this round hump around the outside ring of this wheel. They must, to Ezekiel, they must be the wings. So again, think of that picture we showed you. We'll show it again to you here in a minute. Let's continue verse 12. And they, the vehicles, went every one straight forward, whether the Spirit was to go. They went. Wherever they went wherever they wanted to. And they turned not when they went. It wasn't like, phew, phew. It was like boom, 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 back and forth, everywhere they wanted, they would go. Let's continue, verse 13. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Now, everywhere in the Bible that we see the presence of God, which is, we see this light, we see this brightness. It's often called the Shekinah glory, but it's always present when God appears on earth. Verse 14. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. I mean, they were quick. They would move just quick. 15. Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with its 4 faces. One of these vehicles landed. It came down to earth. Verse 16. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of beryl. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Again, let's look at that. Let's look at that picture that we showed you. It looks like a wheel, and if you look at the center of it, it looks like it might be a conglomeration of wheels. And if you were on Earth and witnessing these crafts coming your direction, as you looked up at them, they would look like wheels inside of wheels. Now, this word beryl, it means topaz. So these wheels inside of wheels were moving in formation. To continue, verse 17. When they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. So again, picture that big wooden wheel, but on its side, and that's what Ezekiel is describing. Verse 18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes. Now get this. Round about them 4. Again, let's show that picture. You see what looks to be portholes in the center of that craft. Those are portholes that Ezekiel is describing. 19. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them, and when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Verse 20. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go, and the wheels were lifted up against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. Did you hear that? There's people inside the wheels. Verse 21. When those went, these went. When the craft went, the people went with them. Just like in an airplane. The only thing with an airplane, it has a nose and a tail, and it goes in that. These things, they just went wherever they wanted. Let me start 21 again. When those went, these went. The people went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. The people were in the wheels. And you can tell, Ezekiel was amazed. He was having a hard time trying to understand this. Verse 22. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creatures was as the color of the terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. Again, this is the glory of God, the Shekinah glory. It's described many places in the Bible. Verse 23. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one towards the other. Every one had two, which covered on this side, and every one had two, which covered on the other side, their bodies. So they aren't out flapping, they're tucked in, and they're forming this ring, making a circle, like we were talking about before. To continue, verse 24. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings. So when they came to the ground and everything settled, from a visual point of view, you can kind of picture how they were way up there, and now they're down more in eye level. Now, this sound, remember, sounds to me sort of like a whooshing sound. 25. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. They've landed. 26. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. The appearance of God. God had come to give Ezekiel a message. And this message was not only for his generation, but we'll see, is for our generation also. 27. And I saw the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about, the shining, the glory of God. Moses saw it, the burning bush, many other places. In the New Testament, in Revelation chapter 1, verse 15 and 16, Christ appeared to his disciples the same way. It sounds very, very similar. Verse 28, as the appearance of the bow that is in the clouds, a rainbow, in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Now, if you're reading along with me, King James, you'll notice those letters are capitalized. That's the holy name, Yahweh. Yahweh. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. Now, let's talk about this rainbow a little bit, prison of light. There's another place, in Revelation, when Christ returns, the rainbow is there, the bow is there, but also in Revelation chapter 5, when Satan arrives, the false Christ shows up here on earth, he also has a rainbow, but because he's the great imitator, he's going to try to look and play it out. But the thing about is described in the 5th chapter of Revelation about this bow is it's fake. It's like one you'd get at the 10-cent store or the dollar store these days. I'm sorry. Notice that Ezekiel falls on his face. Now, I'll give you a little hint. God doesn't like it when he comes to talk to somebody when they do this. I mean, Ezekiel is showing reverence and humbleness and so on and so forth, but God wants us to address him as elect, as his soldiers in this spiritual war against Satan. For an example of this, go to the 38th chapter of Job. Job kind of did the same thing. God was a little rougher than he is with Ezekiel here, but basically he did the same thing. Let's see how God reacts to Ezekiel here, chapter 2, verse 1. And he said unto me, again, Ezekiel speaking, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto you. Stand up, be a man. And the Spirit entered into me when he spake unto me, and set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. I mean, Ezekiel, he didn't even, God didn't wait for him to get up. He lifted him. And I want to stress this. What God is going to tell Ezekiel is a message for us also. He'll tell us here in verse 3. Verse 3, And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even until this very day. And friends, I'll tell you, it's even until this very day. That's today. God wants you to know this, that he doesn't want us to be rebellious. He doesn't want his children rebelling. Are you ready to hear the truth? Excuse me. Do you know who the 12 tribes of Israel are and where they are today? Because this is a message to them. The thing that's just so evident in this world today is that they are still rebelling against God. It's very easy. We all seem to know who Judah is. And, there was a remnant of Benjamin that was absorbed into Judah way before this took place. After this took place. Benjamin did some despicable things, and the other 11 tribes went to war against Benjamin and wiped out the male population. Judah absorbed the women into their tribe and married and had children, but there were some children in Benjamin that survived that were not mixed with Judah. In fact, in the New Testament, Paul himself says that he's a Benjamite. So The point that I'm getting at is we know who Judah is. We call them Jews. That's who makes up Israel, lives in the Holy Land. In 1948, fulfilling Scripture, fulfilling prophecy, Israel was returned to the Holy Land and fulfilled the parable of the fig tree and began the last generation. The question is, what about these other 10 tribes? That's Judah and Benjamin, but what about the other 10? In our next installment of things that you weren't taught in church, we're going to go into who the 10 tribes were, the bloodline, and where we find these 10 tribes. You may be surprised, you may not, but I'll give you a hint. You may very well be a member of one of those 10 tribes. Remember, Angels Are Aliens. It's on sale everywhere. Until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. Teach them, help them. Remember, the elect in these end times will forge the path to the Lord.